Brady, didn't I have you read that last week? I think I messed up. Did anybody else feel like we read it last week?
Yep.
Yeah? Are you just saying that?
No, I remember it.
Yeah, you remember it? I don't know if you and I are enough to outweigh the majority good.
Yes.
Huh? We did read it last week. All right. I apologize. There are those of you who've been in education, it's probably, and also in kind of the corporate world too, where there are phases that certain terminology goes through, like buzzwords, and I think buzzwords or phrases that get thrown around for some period of time, and then kind of falls out of favor, and some new thing comes up, like trauma informed. I don't know if you've ever heard that. That's been something that's been big. I'm trying to think of some other. I'm not thinking of anything else, but there's been a gazillion. I know Eddie and I have talked about it in the past. Things that go into fashion and then fall out of fashion, and it seems like a sort of cycle. Well, that happens. That kind of happens in the religious world as well. And one thing that I've been hearing the past few years is the idea of image bearers of God. And to be honest, when I hear a number, I'm in a preacher group on Facebook, and we kind of bounce ideas off each other and ask questions, and we sort of study together from afar. And I hear that phrase comes up, image bearer. Let me get there. Right. That image bearers of God, that comes up. And I'll be honest, when I hear a bunch of people saying something, my first thought is that it's a trendy thing, or that people are doing it to sound cool. And after I've had red flags go up, then I give it a little more thought. And only after my red flags go up do I give it deeper thought. And that's been the case with this phrase, image bearer of God. And what has happened is my eyes have been opened to something that was way more of a thing in Scripture than I ever imagined. The idea, the concept of people being image bearers of God, that is bearing the image of God, that is having sort of the stamp of God on them. That is a big thing. It is a big thing. And so these preacher friends of mine that throw that language around, they were right. They were onto something that was good for me to get into. And so I'm hoping that you can see what I'm saying as we go through this study this morning. Obviously, some of you are already thinking of Genesis 1. It goes back to the creation itself in Genesis 1:26. And so when you think about something that goes literally all the way back, then that automatically will be a big deal. That automatically will be a big deal. But then it is repeated. And it's repeated a lot and in a variety of ways. We start in Genesis 1:26. It says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, or of the heavens, and over the livestock, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. So we have a generic use of the term man or mankind, referring to men and women. And it goes on, and God blessed them. And God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the heavens and over every living thing that moves on the earth. And God said, behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that's on the face of all the earth, and every tree with seed in its fruit. You shall have them for food. And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the heavens, and to everything that creeps on the earth, everything that has the breath of life, I have given every green plant for food. And it was so. God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. So what does it mean? What does it mean to be created in God's image? What does it mean that it's only after God creates men and women that he says, my creation is very good? If you go back on your own time, go to the end of each of the first 5 days of creation, he says it was good. And men and women are his crowning creation. As far as creation goes, men and women are special. There's something different. Why does he only then say that it was very good? But the question really that I want to get at this morning is, what does that mean for the treatment of others? What does it mean that everybody is an image bearer of God? One place I don't have scripted into this is Acts 17. And in Acts 17, when Paul's talking to the Greeks on Mars Hill, he says that we're all God's offspring. We're all children of God. But one of the first things that happens, one of the first sins that we have recorded is the murder of Abel by his brother Cain in Genesis chapter 4. And then when Noah and his family get off the ark, God says something about that. In Genesis chapter 9, let's read the first 7 verses of Genesis 9. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth and upon every bird of the heavens, upon everything that creeps on the earth and all the fish of the sea. Into your hands they are delivered. Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. And as I gave you the green plants, I give you everything. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. And for your lifeblood I will require a reckoning. From every beast I will require it, and from man. From his fellow man I will require a reckoning for the life of man. Whoever sheds the blood of man, by man shall his blood be shed. If you ask me, that's God setting up an eternal principle. The basic course of human history has shown us that when people kill, when people murder, they receive a penalty for that. That's the basic course of human existence. When you talk about governments, there's capital punishment. That's the course of human events. If you murder, you die. Why? By man shall his blood be shed. For God made man in his own image. And you be fruitful and multiply and increase greatly on the earth and multiply in it. So, God says we ought not murder because everyone is made in the image of God. So you have to see that means that we're slighting God. It's offending God. offending the extension of God to the people or to the people around you when you murder. In some way, we are slighting God when we murder another. Murder offends the image of God in the body of one of His special creations. Let's let that trickle down. Let's let that percolate. What does that mean for what we could also call violence? What does it mean for other types of violence against another human? Anger can be violent. Anger can be a violence. Angry words can be a violence. And bitterness, and resentment, and hatred, and all the things. This lesson goes hand in hand with last week. The Christian response to hatred. If murder is the highest violence, and it offends the image of God in one of His special creations, then what about other forms of violence? And before we begin, the disclaimer is that just as much as I can show you all the passages and all the logic about how people bear the image of God, there's also a sense in which the divide between the human and the divine can't be reached, cannot be bridged. And I would say that Romans 1, 20 through 23 helps us see that pretty well. Romans 1, beginning in 20, says, "For His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world in the things that have been made. So they are without excuse." That is, the people who suppress the truth in unrighteousness and say that there is no God. They're without excuse. "For although they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks to Him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, they became fools, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things." So there is that one sense of the image of God that has no comparison. That has no comparison to what humans have. We started talking about murder. And I'm trying to bring that to other violence. In Matthew 5, in the Sermon on the Mount, it's laid out for us there. I believe that we could make the case that this is talking about the seriousness of anger. But we're not going to try somebody for actual murder because they got angry. I've been angry with Kathy before. I don't believe that I should be legally tried in the eyes of the law for murder, or spiritually tried. Let's say there was an eldership, Pete Davis, you have sinned, you have murdered your sister. But watch what it does say. In verse 21 of Matthew 5, you've heard that it was said to those of old, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council, and whoever says, 'You fool,' will be liable to the hell of fire." At the very minimum, be careful. And what you're going to see is that you're offending the image of God in another. Be careful with your thoughts. Be careful with your words. In Galatians 5, I'll read it and then I'll give you my thoughts on it. Galatians 5:13 through 15. Galatians 5:13, "For you were called to freedom, brothers. Only do not use your freedom as an opportunity for the flesh, but through love serve one another." Through love serve one another. "For the whole law is fulfilled in one word, You shall love your neighbor as yourself. But if you bite and devour one another, watch out that you're not consumed by one another. These verses say that our brother is someone who would qualify. I don't think our neighbor is only our brother. But certainly it says our brother would qualify as our neighbor in love your neighbor as yourself. And it also says that through love we ought to serve one another. Think about the negativity of anger and hatred and murder. And we got to watch those. We got to watch those. And that negativity, how that negativity manifests toward image bearers of God. Then we need to think about how we positively behave toward others as a type of service to God. Right? On the one hand, you look at the negative, we don't slight the image of God by hurting those who were made in His image. And then on a positive level, we think about how our service to others is by extension a service to God. Jesus makes that clear in Matthew 25. I couldn't find a more specific or explicit spot to look at. Matthew 25:34. Matthew 25:34. It says, "Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, saying, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? And when did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit you?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me.'" And so serving others is also serving God. We can't continue this conversation without mentioning words. And so I have a few passages. First of all, in James chapter 3, that talks about the tongue. James 3, 2 through 12. It's lengthy, but we can look at it. One of the things that struck me as I did this study is I was seeing connections all over the place that I hadn't seen before, and just little subtle things that popped out. In James 3 and verse 2, "For we all stumble in many ways, and if anyone does not stumble in what he says, he is a perfect man, able also to bridle his whole body." If we put bits into the mouths of horses so that they obey us, we guide their whole bodies as well. Look at the ships also. Though they're so large and driven by strong winds, they're guided by a very small rudder wherever the will of the pilot directs. So also the tongue is a small member, yet it boasts of great things. How great a forest is set ablaze by such a small fire. And the tongue is a fire, a world of unrighteousness. The tongue is set among our members, that is our body parts, staining the whole body, setting on fire the entire course of life, and set on fire by hell. For every kind of beast and bird, of reptile and sea creature can be tamed, and has been tamed by mankind. Sounded a little like Genesis 1 and Genesis 9. But no human being can tame the tongue. It's a restless evil, full of deadly poison. With it we bless our Lord and Father, and with it we curse people who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth come blessing and cursing. Brothers, these things ought not to be so. Does a spring pour forth from the same opening both fresh and salt water? Can a fig tree, my brothers, bear olives? Or a grapevine produce figs? Neither can a salt pond yield fresh water. Blessing God, cursing man. 1 Peter has that, repeats that blessing. 1 Peter 3 doesn't mention explicitly the image of God. But I want you to see how the image of God, as we absorb, as we sort of take it on and cultivate it as being made in God's image, and we reflect it, like Matthew 5:16 talks about, let your light so shine before men that they might see your good works and glorify your Father is in heaven. It's cliche, but we talk about reflecting the sun, right? Something goes out into, we're going to step out today, and I presume there's going to be some sun, and that sunlight is going to hit your body, and you are going to reflect it. Everything that becomes visible is light, Ephesians 5 says. And we reflect the sun. Capital S-O-N. Reflecting Jesus. Being conformed to the image of Christ. And so, as we reflect the image of God, we're blessings flowing through us too. Finally, all of you have unity of mind, sympathy, brotherly love, a tender heart, and a humble mind. Do not repay evil for evil or reviling for reviling, but on the contrary, bless. For to this you were called, that you may obtain a blessing. Blessing coming in and being a blessing to others. For whoever desires to love life and see good days, let him keep his tongue from evil and his lips from speaking deceit. Let him turn away from evil and do good. Let him seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. Think about it. Let your light so shine. And blessing must flow through us. And I hinted there that there's more to this image now for those of you who are in Christ. An updated image. When you were conceived, you bore the image of God as one of his special creations. When you were born again, you began partaking of the very essence of God. Not to say that you're going to become a God, but partaking in his nature. And that process, I believe, begins at baptism. It does not come to a place where you are God. It grows. There's some culminating thing when we get to heaven. 2 Peter 1, 3-4. I'm going too fast. I'm going to turn in my Bible to 2 Peter 1. And then I'm going to look at my computer and read 2 Peter 1. There we go. We've had enough time. His divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness, through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence, by which he has granted to us his precious, very great promises, so that through them you may become partakers of the divine nature, having escaped from the corruption that is in the world because of sinful desire. Two chapters, or the next chapter, 2 Peter 2. He's going to say that past tense, the Christians that he was writing to in the first century, they escaped the defilements of the world. Does that mean that they never sinned? No, it doesn't mean that they never sinned. but it means that some of the force of the sin and some of the effects of the sin have bypassed them as Christians. They're no longer amenable in the same way as before they became Christian. That's at the end of 2 Peter 2. It talks about people going back. Back like a dog to his own vomit. Back like a sow who has already washed and then goes back to rolling in the mud after having escaped the defilements of the world. Ephesians 4, 20 through 24 talks about this updated likeness of God in the Christian. Ephesians 4:20, but that is not the way you learned Christ. Obviously there's some context there. Assuming that you have heard about him and were taught in him as the truth is in Jesus, to put off your old self, which belongs to your former manner of life and is corrupt through deceitful desires. Think about that. You know what deceiving means when you deceive someone. When you hold back a key piece of information, right? That they would actually really need to know in order to have the information that they need to whatever. You know that. But do you know this? Do you know that the desires inside of you trick you? That they deceive you, that you deceive yourself. Put off your old self. And to be renewed in the spirit of your minds, and to put on the new self, created after the likeness of God in true righteousness and holiness. After the likeness of God. Been really angry, right? Past couple weeks. Been really angry, so I gave you that lesson last week about the Christian response to hatred. Because there was some hateful thoughts brewing inside of me, right? And then to come through this week and think about people bear the image of God. What does that mean for how I interact with them, how I think about them? Right? I'm pretty good at saying the right words. I'm sorry. Right? That's no good. That's good. So that's not good. So hopefully a perspective or two has changed, or just a reminder or two has been planted that you gotta be careful. Be careful. Put some thought in it. Yeah. The next chapter of Ephesians talks about standing up to unrighteousness. It talks about reproving evil. So it's not saying that you can't stand up. It's not saying that you can't reprove the evil deeds of darkness, like the next chapter says. But earlier in Ephesians 4, and probably especially in the context of us, it talks about speaking the truth in love. Love has a lot wrapped into it. Probably some gentleness, probably some tenderness, probably some kindness. But 1 Corinthians 13:6 says that love doesn't rejoice with unrighteousness, or rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth. So speaking the truth in love is going to take into account what the person needs to hear and how they need to hear it, and how you should guard the way you approach an image bearer of God. We will wrap it up. And if you need to come into a covenant relationship with God and Christ, you can do that if you've believed, and if you've changed your mind about sin and changed your mind about your direction, and you're willing to confess sin and be baptized in Him. That now's as good a time as any. There is no time like the present, they say. And so you're welcome to let us know as we stand and sing.